We're going to start tonight's program. Welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening for our Black Women Lead in Rhode Island program. The Women's Fund of Rhode Island, for those of you who are new to our organization, is a nonprofit that invests in women and girls. And we do that through research, advocacy, grant making, and strategic partnerships designed to achieve gender equity. It is my immense pleasure tonight to be able to focus on some of the women that the Women's Fund of Rhode Island is supporting, or their organizations that are being supported through some of the grant making that we do in Rhode Island for an important conversation. Before we get started though, I thought that it would be useful to just share some background information. We are part of the Women's Funding Network. We are part of a group of women's funds across the nation and around the world who are focusing on gender equity. And one of our sister organizations that you may recognize is the Ms. Foundation for Women. And last year they put out a report called Pocket Change: How Women and Girls of Color Do More with Less. And in the report, it really highlighted how the total philanthropic giving to women and girls of color is just $5.48 a year for each woman or girl of color in the United States, which accounts for under 0.5% of the total billions of dollars that are given by foundations for all of their philanthropic giving. These organizations serving Black or African-American women and girls were more likely to have budgets under $50,000. And so taking that into account, it just means that organizations that are serving this population, which we would argue is under-resourced and has been since the beginning of our history here in Rhode Island, in the nation, it's important to be able to lift up the important work that the women here tonight are doing to change that narrative. So I am so happy to have our grantees in the room, and I'm really happy also to welcome Raza Clifton, who is our moderator for the evening. Reza is a writer, an artist, an educator, and a cultural savant. She brings all of these things together as a high school teacher by advocating for justice and equity for women, communities of color, and other marginalized or often oppressed groups. And by using traditional and new media tools, she tells stories, explores and celebrates the African diaspora. She's got a social media space and a zine called the 3 a.m. in the New Black. You should check that out. You can see her poetry as well as her artistic and political work. And we can put in the chat how to access that. It's at 3 a.m. Black on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We'll put that, there you go. Thank you, Ellie. So without further ado, because it's important that we have lots of time to hear from both our moderator and our panelists, I'm going to turn this over to Reza. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm just honored to be here and be able to participate in this conversation. And I just want to talk about for a second how much credit goes to Ellie, goes to Kelly, and goes to every single person out there who is not just on a Zoom call, but running it. I'm lucky to have very few responsibilities on the running end, and yet I'm still nervous. So go Ellie, go Kelly. I just really am excited to be here with our panelists. And I think a lot of what we're going to talk about and dig right into is what our folks do. But I just wanted to share a couple highlights from Lisa, Ditra, and Kimberly's bios that were flashing on the screen, and just to give them also room and space to talk about the issues. And I'll shout you out, okay? So, starting just for a moment with our panelist, Lisa, a couple things that are so cool and so impressive, folks, right? So she's worked with Fortune 500 companies, okay? That's something that you hear about, and we don't all have a chance to do that. A lot of her work has been about these intricate levels of working with businesses and corporate organizations. So she has leadership as an area of expertise, but she has diversity and inclusion as an area of expertise as well. And then she has a host of awards that she has earned doing this important work for women and Black folks in Rhode Island, including awards from the Rhode Island Monthly magazine, the NAACP, Rhode Island Affirmative Action Professionals. Those are a couple of things about Lisa that just wanted to touch on, right? If we move to Ditra for a minute, and again, they're going to tell you more about themselves, their organizations. My shout outs have to do with the fact, Ditra, the work that you have been doing includes racial and economic justice, but also the work around health and bringing together media and health is phenomenal and so important to the way in which the changes around healthcare access in this country. If you were doing this work of media and healthcare, you were part of the changes that we know about that came with the Affordable Care Act, et cetera. So that was one of the things for me that jumped out about your bio, Ditra, because folks need to understand that you were part of this movement that has so many more people insured to this day. And just touching really quickly on a couple things in Kimberly's bios. And again, folks, I'm just name dropping here because we have things that have been flashing and we're going to hear directly from them. First of all, the number of years that you have been developing your craft, it really, it lets us know that we're about to hear from someone who knows what they're talking about. 20 plus years of experience, operations, planning and development, also helping organizations expand outreach, achieve financial stability. And your work has included working with organizations like the Robert F. Kennedy Children's Action, the you're teaching with Stonehill College. Your bio is just phenomenal in terms of the work that you're doing, the organizations that you're connecting with and connecting people to. And it was just such a treat to read about that. Those are a couple highlights. That's me talking. Starting with you, Kimberly Zouzoua. In your words, could you tell us a little bit about your organization that you're currently representing today, your role there, and other pieces maybe of your bio that are worth hearing from that I didn't touch on?
Oh, sure. I am the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for the Center for Women in Enterprise. Some of you may have heard about it. The organization focuses on helping women launch starting from idea to launching and starting and sustaining their businesses, then moving them to the point of where they're eligible for certification. We try to touch each point of the life of an entrepreneur from the beginning. And so we offer training, we offer support, we create a community. And I'm really excited to say that we have moved in this era that we are very much intentional in our efforts to develop and to ensure that women of color have a place to come together to really talk about initiatives, to talk about what they're needing in regards to supporting and building their businesses. We actually launched our Women of Color Business Summit last year, again, focusing on issues and concerns. One of the topics that we offered a facilitator in was diversity, inclusion, and equity, how to navigate when you're the only one. And so creating an environment where they are safe. We also opened it up to our white sisters in an effort for them to learn. And in my intro was specific about This is great. We want you to be here. We want you to learn, because when you're at those tables where we are not represented, you can carry on our mission and our story, and to be able to speak on our behalf. So that's what our organization does. We're affiliated also with WeBank, the certification entity, and we ensure that not only is the organization owned, but it's operated, it's led, its bylaws state, and the final dotted line that is signed by is by a woman. So we're really excited about the work that we are doing there. We are in the process of planning our Women of Color Business Summit for this year, and looking for folk all around to be a part of that and to contribute to that effort, and really moving forward the agenda of Black women and women of color from the perspective of what do we need to do to help you sustain your businesses. The American Express report came out in 2019 that actually showed that the largest group that are starting their businesses are women of color, Black women, but where the challenges are is the sustainability. Why is it that we cannot sustain our businesses? Where's the support coming from? And so we try to address that. So that's just a little bit about my organization, who we are, what we do, and we span Rhode Island, Massachusetts, all of New England, and doing great work in the Rhode Island area. And we're so appreciative of the support that we receive from the Women's Fund of Rhode Island to help us do what we do in this environment.
Before we move on, why don't you talk a little about the recent grant that you received from Women's Fund?
The recent grant that we are utilizing right now from the Women's Fund is really focused on how we can create curriculum specifically focused on financial stability. We have a 10-week business planning course where once a woman comes into that course and she has completed that course, she has a bank-ready business plan. So they help us and support us in that effort directly. So you see the direct impact from the beginning to the end.
Wonderful, thank you so much. A lot there to take on. Ditra, I'd like to hear a little from you and have you introduce yourself a little bit to the panel. If you could tell us a little about yourself, your organization in particular, what you're doing there, and tell us a little about how your work is supporting or benefiting or uplifting Black women.
Well, I would, thanks for the invitation. Hello to everybody. Y'all need to be turning those cameras on. I'm talking to your names.
I mean, there was a lot of community like in this vibe. So I hear you.
So Ditra Edwards, she, her, hers pronouns. I am blessed to be a co-founder of Sista Fire with the amazing Chinrabi Prong. And for me, this being a co-founder has meant an awful lot to me. What does it mean for a Black woman and a Cambodian woman to really come together intergenerationally, and who we are to build a member-led organization? So that's been amazing. Our work is focused on our membership, and we support Black, Indigenous, women of color, and non-binary folks of color to really lead and to create change in their communities based on the things that are impacting them. So we're really looking at social, economic, and political transformation, strategizing around what does that look like for us. As the director, my role is really about more facilitating and supporting folks to really lean into and live into their own possibilities. I am blessed to have an amazing team of members and an organizing committee and a staff that is growing, that we support folks in multiple ways. Some of that is through our leadership development programs. That's also about organizing around issues that are impacting us. One of our biggest campaigns in the work that we're doing is in a community accountability session with Women and Infants Hospital in addressing the impact of reproductive justice and really wanting to change the birth outcomes for Black women and their children. And making sure that we're addressing the issues of structural racism that exists within the healthcare system, which is really critical for whole life. That process has been going on for the last 2 years. We've been able to make some good headway into that process in terms of making sure they are addressing issues around workforce and who are they hiring? How are they hiring? Are they creating pipelines within women and infants? What is happening when interpretation and translation? And all of this came out of, these are just 2 things that came out of participatory action research. We've trained a set of young women, Black, Indigenous, folks of color, to be researchers themselves and to go out and build community, because we're trying to change the narrative around what people say about who we are, because we feel like we have to be able to speak for ourselves. And our participatory action research has allowed us to be able to do that. So we are not a service organization in any way. We're about addressing and looking at and working towards change in our own lives and leading in that process. And so all of our leadership within the organization comes up from that organizing work. Our organizing committee is made up about 15 amazing women who have been active since we started. We're 4 years old. Our staff is growing right now. We have a core staff of about 3. We've been interviewing people right now, trying to expand our work. So yeah, that's.
And are you a recent grant recipient as well from Women's Fund?
Yeah, so the Women's Fund helps support our organizing work with around accountability work that we're doing. We're also working on the doula bill. So it supports our policy work and our organizing work around change. So the doula bill is up. So all y'all who are not engaged in the fight for on the doula bill, get down with us, because we need as many folks involved as possible. We have a core of amazing doulas here that are Black doulas from Homogenea, who have really been leading. The Black doulas have played a critical role in this process. We've been organizing other doulas of color to be in this process with us. And our hope is to be able to get the doula bill passed this year, which means that doulas will be able to be reimbursed through Medicaid and private insurance. Well, just insurance. We always use that word private. It's just insurance, no matter what, right?
Right.
But making sure that Black mamas and mamas of color actually can live. So it's part of our larger strategy around reproductive justice and birth justice, is that we're addressing issues, what's happening at women and infants, but we also have to deal with what's happening in our communities and how do we support moms to really have access. The life expectancy increases by about 30% when a person has a doula. And so for us, that's a critical strategy for supporting doulas. But it's also about supporting doulas themselves and making sure they're able to have a living wage. It's about making sure that they are valued in who they are and how they do their work in our community. Yeah, so there we have it.
Wonderful, such important work. And I'm like scrolling a little through the faces, at least. Again, shout out to Ellie and Kelly, because that's the best I can do, is scrolling through faces. But as you're speaking, I'm seeing heads nodding, Ditra, and I'm definitely seeing a lot of interest peaked around this topic of maternity health. I do want to switch gears to Lisa and give you a chance, Miss Lisa, to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about the organization that you're repping or organizations you're repping. Tell us a little about your leadership, and tell us about your work as a Black woman and with and for Black women.
So yeah, so Reza, thank you so much. And Kelly and team, thanks so much for the opportunities to be here, and then also in supporting the work that we do, and also for the folks that are here. So let me just say, I'm glad that we're having this conversation. When I look down at the participant, I'm a little disappointed that it's not that many of us here. I mean, but I'm so appreciative that we're here, the folks that are here, because we could be elsewhere, right? But we chose to be here. So that's really powerful. But again, as I'm thinking about, you know, when I go to different events and I see the participation, and now we're talking about Black community and we're talking about Black issues and Black leaders, and then folks are not showing up. So again, that comes back to that institutional racism that we are talking about, that we'll be talking about in Lent. But that kind of annoys me. So I had to start off with that. So sorry. But again, Lisa Ranglin, one of the founding member of the Rhode Island Black Business Association, and the work that we've been doing over the last 10 years. This year is actually a really amazing year for us. It's our 10th year, and we're super excited. I'm one of the founding member of the association. And, you know, we started this organization back as an interest group in 2010, and specifically around closing gaps as it relates to business development. We know that lots of data has shown us that when we have strong Black businesses within communities, we have better outcomes. We have good paying jobs. We have the biggest thing that a lot of people talk about is crime reduction, right? But what I like to talk about is home ownership is increased. We also see, you know, when we think about unemployment within Black and Brown communities, I think often we talk about the 4.5% that we may see at the state level, or 6%. When we look at the South Side of Providence, unemployment is up about 25%. When we look in the other urban cores, such as, you know, Central Falls, or in, you know, Pawtucket, or, you know, a little bit of Newport and some of, you know, East Providence and so forth, unemployment is out the roof, right? And the reason for that is because we don't have strong Black businesses within these communities. The other thing that we are doing, and what we're trying to do when we think about scaling Black businesses, is around home ownership. We know that, you know, when we have strong Black businesses, home ownership also goes up. And we also know when home ownership goes up, that's a direct wealth creation. And when we think about generational wealth and passing something on to the next generation, what we have seen, you know, through the work that we're doing at the Rhode Island Black Business Association, is that we don't have that wealth to pass on to the next generation, right? So when we think about how do we empower a community, so this work that we're doing, it's really about closing gaps, whether it's around health, education outcomes, whether it's about, you know, getting people what they need, what we call pocketbook issues, right? So, you know, paying for the mortgage or paying their rent, keeping food on the table, those kind of pocketbook issues. But really, our organization is really about empowerment to be able to drive wealth, job creation, and really, we talked about we heard earlier about sustainability, right? So what do I mean by that? Too often, when we think of Black communities and we look at an organization like Rhode Island Black Business Association, very much underfunded since we've been around for 10 years, right? So why is that? Why an organization like RIBBA that is talking about job creation, wealth creation, generational wealth is underfunded? So if we peel the onion back about this work, and it's so critically important that we really dissect it, and somebody mentioned about, you know, the dollars that goes to Black-led organization like us, so we're doing critically important work. Our businesses are unable to access loans and contract because they're not bankable. And we've been talking to banks over the last 10 years. So why are they not thinking about investing in this community? The other thing that we're trying to do and we're hoping to do, and we've been talking to different people, it's specifically around, and I get quite, I spoke with this woman this morning and I'm still thinking about her. She had a hair salon and she was unable to, the governor closed the state, so she closed her salon and she was unable to reopen. She was unable to access PPP dollars, the payroll protection program. She was unable to access the Restore RI, that was federal funded from federal government, COVID-19 free dollars. And she came to RIBBA and we were out of money. Our loan fund was dry. And this woman, I spoke with her because we're doing an article with a local newspaper and a television station, and they wanted to talk to business owners that were closed as a result of the pandemic. And I've talked to probably about 15 different businesses that are closed and nobody wants to go on camera. So why did I bring that up, right? Because I'm supposed to be introducing myself and doing all of these other stuff, but why do I share this real story? So when we're talking about the impact of COVID-19 and racism, we're talking about real people. We're talking about real families. So it's very hard for us to separate and just kind of have these simple freestyle conversation without connecting it to real people, right? So an organization that's been around for 10 years, underfunded or undercapitalized, but yet we're saying there's this urgent need for us to do more within Black communities. So we do these amazing superficial things, right? And we don't really get to the root cause of what's driving a lot of this, right? And I think, you know, as we go through this conversation, I hope that we lead from the place of, you know, we're hearing conversation and we're reacting to what Black leaders are saying. Too often Black leaders work, and I've seen it, our organization have submit proposal and we see the proposal elsewhere. And too often that our leadership is not valued or respected and supported in a meaningful way. So, you know, let me just say one more thing. Organization like ours and leaders like Ditra and Kimberly, the work that we're doing is critically important. And what I'm going to ask for the 36 of us on this call is to move from what I consider being either actors or ally. What I'm going to challenge us to do when we leave from here today, one actionable thing, is to move to accomplice. And what do I mean by that? We need to be in this game and in this fight and says, I am ready to lose as well. It's not about just Black folks that need to be taking all this battle on, right? That we're suffering through this battle. I mean, my God, 400 plus years we're talking about, right? So I challenge all of us to ask ourselves, what can we do to be the change that we want to see in the world? And how can we move from actors, and actors basically what they want to do, they keep the status quo, they love their power and they are happy with their privilege and they like stuff the way it is. And if you jump over to being, you know, an ally, then you're there and you cheer me on, but you don't really do anything more other than cheering me on. But I'm challenging us to say, I'm going to roll up my sleeve and I'm going to really be in this fight together with Black folks to really drive changes that will see sustainable changes, not just for some of us, but for all of us. So again, thank you guys for the opportunity.
I think, I mean, keeping it real, like, right? I really value that every time we talk interpersonally, Lisa, and also when I see you on any sort of stage or space, like keeping it real. We have work to do that goes beyond today's call. And I just, before we move to kind of another area of questions and pieces, I'm wondering, even right now, what is some of the work that you have happening at RIBBA that you think that for anyone on the call who's like, I'm ready for this, I don't know what to do, that lady who like called me on it, I want to work with her.
Yeah, so we got lots, we got lots of stuff, right? So we're actually expanding. So Ditra, shout out to you. Let me just say, by Monday, we'll be up to 4 full-time staff, which is, yay, finally. And I am also at the association part-time as the moving from president to the executive director in a part-time capacity. So that's like 4.5 of us. That's really exciting, right? But let me just share. So Kelly and Ellie knows this. We have been funded for what we're calling an emerging leadership program, training program. And of course, COVID came. We were supposed to launch this thing last year. And then of course, COVID just showed up. And we will be kicking off an emerging leadership program in the spring. And it's very different than any leadership program that is here in Rhode Island and that you will see anywhere. What we have done, we have talked to about over 45 individuals here in the state. And again, this program is designed by Black people and brown people, and it's for Black and brown folks, right? So what we're doing, we know that the challenges to scale and the challenges to leadership ranks and to be in decision-making role is very critical, and it's very, very sort of not for all of us, right? And we need to break that down. So this leadership training program, it's a 6-month program. Since last year, we've been shopping it around to different companies, city and state, and we're getting a great, I wanna say, people are like getting really excited. People are like calling, banks are calling us to say, when you're gonna start, when you're gonna open the registration, because this program is very different. It is by women of color or people of color. Initially, it was going to be only for women. And of course, because of the demand for it, we actually open it now to not just women, but people of color. And we're going to launch it with about 20, 25 individuals. There will be 3 spots left out for people that are not working with a company or an organization, but for community leaders, you know, what we're calling emerging leaders that are in our community. They may be just volunteering or doing incredible work, leaders, but they're not affiliated with any organization. So that's that piece of it, which is super excited about that. Partnership with URI and some other partners that we'll share via press release. So really, really excited about that. In addition, our loan program, which our loan program is an emergency loan program, which offers loan from $500 to $10,000. And this program is really unique. So here it's, say a contractor gets a city job or a job somewhere, and he or she may need material, or they may need to buy or pay for some bonding or what have you, and they don't have this fund. They bring their contract to us as an organization, and we pledge and give them up to at least $10,000. So one, they can buy their material, they can cover their insurance, and they can start their work. And as soon as they get their first, so it's like a collateral, right? So it's like pledge. So we attach our loan to their contract, which is really unique. So as soon as they get that first check, we get a portion of that until it's all paid up. So that's a really unique program. Sadly, that program is underfunded as well. We have gotten some startup funding from the city of Providence and some from Commerce, because the state offered a skinny bill this year, or a skinny budget, I should say, rather. We were not able to get our loan fund funded. So we need money in that. And I've been begging and calling everybody to say, guys, we need to get money in this pool, because some of you may have read in the news or heard from the governor, only 25% of Black or brown individuals or business owners were able to access Restore RI, $50 million out on the street. Only 20% went to Black or Latino. So let that sink in for a moment, right? $50 million, and only 26% were able to go to this population. Again, it comes back to bankability. These companies are not bankable. And what do I mean by that? They have issues with their credit, cash flow, or maybe their statements is offline. It's not on their systematically track, that kind of thing. So we're working to really get to what's happening with these businesses, identify specifically, get them bankable so they have relationship with banks. And we're also doing business mentorship. So lots of great work. So Reza, thanks for that question. And the last piece of it is around the technical assistant program. And that's the one that we have since 2015. Great program. All of these programs, again, underfunded, but critically important for the development of Black community, the scalability of Black businesses, and the long-term growth of our community, right? I think we need to think about how racism is robbing all of us. Racism is robbing not just Black and brown folks, but collectively as a state, as a country, all of us, right? We're in this together. So we got to wake up and we got to challenge ourselves to do more. But thank you, Reza, for that.
I mean, I'm so struck by so much of what you've said and what has been said. And I think that, like, I want to give a shout out to my mom who's on the call, Judge Thompson, because I think that one of the things that, thinking about my mom being on the call and me being here, thinking about you, Lisa, and the conversations you have with your daughter, and what some of the things that have come up from Kimberly and from Ditra, this idea around generational change, generational collaboration, has come up from all of you in some capacity or another. So whether you're talking about mentorship programs, there's a generational link. You're talking about the founding of Sista, Ditra, being about this multi-generational joining and coming together. And I was thinking about this before the call, and I'm thinking about it still now. The complicated and the difficult conversations that my mom and I have had, when all of a sudden that realization that a piece of oppression that she has been fighting, I am now fighting too. And we thought we worked on this. And so Lisa, you've talked about it. Ditra, you've talked about it. I just wanted to ask you a little bit, Ditra, about that generational piece, and also if we can squeeze Kim in too, to just talk about that, because we don't have time for everything on this call. I feel like we never make time for like conversations between moms and daughters. Like, it's not a thing. It's not a thing. We don't do it. And we need to do it on this call. Ditra, can you just talk a little bit about working intergenerationally and talk about conversations that you've had through Sista or your own personal life that is about Black woman to Black girl?
Yes.
And it does, and I know also that Chanravi is also, it might be also cross like multiracial as well. So I recognize that, but the gist remains. I need to know, what are you saying to the little girls out there right now, and to the teenage girls, and to the ones in their 20s and 30s who might be realizing like, oh, and you're like, oh, what are you saying? What are we talking about?
So the one thing I wanted to say, I appreciate what Lisa said, right? Because, and then I'm going to pivot to your question, but I think that the thing that is critical for us to recognize is also how much work Black institutions are trying to do here, and that it's not just about the investment, but what is, whether it's government, whether it's corporations, what are they willing to do to change? Because the expectations is always about what we need to do and what we're not prepared for. And structural racism is not about us. It's about the implications of how you choose to operate. Because just hearing the stories that Lisa talked about, we went through some of the same things, right? What does it mean when money is there for institutions, but they don't even know how to get money, figure out how to be engaged with our communities? Lisa, you were one institution trying to hold down a whole lot of space, right? Why do you only have 4 staff? What does it mean, like the growth of what it could mean to have that type of institution to support the infrastructure building within the context of the Black community? That's because people aren't willing to shift what they believe is right or not right. So there's a reason why people aren't bankable. It's not just about us, but it's a way in which banks and others actually do their business. So I just want to say that, because there was multiple folks that Sista had to figure out how to support across race in helping people fill out applications because they weren't translated. people were not, when you think about people who speak other languages, from African communities to Cambodian communities, if you are on a computer, it does not always translate. So there's all kinds of things that this state and corporations did not consider. But what would it mean if Lisa's team was 20 people versus what she had, right? So that's just a thing for me. Now, pivoting back to intergenerational. So Sister Fire starts at 18. We don't have an end, but we start at 18. The highest number of members that we have are really in their 20s, going into their 30s, and then there's some of us that stretch a little bit further than that. Not all of us, but some of us. I'm one of those. And for us, we have a set of values that really drive how we do our work. And we're trying to create a space that really thinks about in our practice and how we approach that we're about belonging and connectivity. We're trying to really be engaged with understanding that each of our lived experience brings whole value into our organization, and it brings whole value into what we're able to do together. I know for myself, and I will speak for me, at times it was a struggle, because for me, I had to learn to lead in a different kind of way. In the US, we are often trained to lead in a framework that is about white patriarchy. Whether we know it or not, it's the way in which leadership gets defined in this country. And so when we talk about decolonization, we have to talk about what does that mean for me and how I lead. And so as one of the oldest within Sister Fire, so what, I'm a director. So what, I'm a co-founder. It is about understanding that no matter who you are, that you have value, and what you have to say in your experience is important. And what kind of space are we creating to make sure folks can lead around that? But we also spend time investing and defining, and through our leadership program, talking about like Ella Baker. Ella Baker led and believed around investing in younger generations because they knew they had vision, right? I love the expression that I am my ancestors' wildest dream.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, hell yeah. Because there's some things I'm not thinking about, but it's also Sister Fire practices collective and high levels of democracy, collective practices. So everyone has input around how we make decisions. And so by definition, inside of the organization, we set up a set of values and a set of practices that creates that kind of space. But it also says, how do you take that beyond just being inside the organization? That's why we do participatory action research, because we want people's voices and experiences integrated into how we do what we do every day, because it is important. And so
I'd like to give Kimberly a chance to also talk on it just a little bit before we go to our breakout sessions.
Okay.
I just need to editorialize that, by the way, in my opinion, all of what you said is intergenerational, including before you started. And I think that that is sort of, I had a hard time getting all of the pieces into the question that I'm trying to present, but it's to say, that it is all intergenerational. And do the messages change, Kimberly, right? So one of the things that you mentioned is that you do work with the Center for Women in Enterprise that brings women together, different folks. Oh, excuse me, I'm kicking off his furniture, excuse me, guys. You bring, Kimberly, different folks together through the Center for Women in Enterprise to learn, to have mentorship, to gain and get skills together, to build community. Does the message change? Does it need to change, Kimberly, when you're thinking about trying to attract newer versus more veteran Black women into your training programs. And I guess, again, I'm thinking of this as a teacher myself, right? And that role of where does hope come in, and where does like truth come in, and where does not so much truth because you want young people to stay hopeful. So Kimberly, can you talk a little bit about like just how you personally through your work at Center for Women in Enterprise have tackled some of those?
Sure. Well, first of all, I know that this year, when we look at it from an organizational perspective, that we are including in our Women of Color Business Summit a specific programming just for young women, right? To get them involved and to see where the opportunities are and to encourage entrepreneurship. Because oftentimes, what we've heard, growing up is go to school, get an education, go to college, right? So you can get a good job. But now we're about, go to school, get an education, start your own career, build your own basic finance, basis for foundation for financial freedom. Now, as for me, I keep it real, so sometimes as a sister to sister, I'll see a young woman who has skills, who is all about doing her business, but may need a little bit of coaching, right? And when it comes to the messaging, yes, when it comes to the challenges that we faced as Black women, as Black people in this society, we're a different generation. Our moms and our dads come from a generation where, peace, Martin Luther King, we're going to fight through the struggle, but we're dealing with a different mentality set now with young people who are ready and willing to fight, to make a stand outwardly for what they believe. Now, when I have conversations with them, it's about, yes, stand, have that fight, but position yourself in a way that you can still have a life after that fight and build upon what you're doing. Almost as if, how do you network? How do you go and representing, you're a beautiful Black woman, positioning yourselves to be able and learning how to ask and demand for what you need and speak in a manner where folk can hear you. All right. So I work with young women and young people from the community that are like, yo, what's up? No, we have to change that behavior. We have to figure out how do we position and present ourselves, right? And it's about building relationship. It's all for me about building relationship and then creating an environment for when they come into the Center for Women in Enterprise, they know they have a support system and that the center is willing, not just willing, but is able to receive them. And they are also able to receive what is necessary for them to succeed. And I am just so pleased that where we have come from within the last 2 years with the organization, where we directly address issues of inequality, of racism, of how we will not tolerate that, and how it's important that all and everyone has that accessibility to be able to start and launch their businesses.
Now we do know, and I'm thinking also of Lisa, your nephew. We don't have a lot of time, but I know we have, before we break off so we can go into individual conversations, but I'm also thinking of like Nico from Newport is on the line, and wanting to push back or ask if there is space, right, in what you just presented, Kimberly, for like the entrepreneurs and the businesses that have been launched that are based on hip hop, that are based on hip hop culture, that are taking what is ours and what our younger generations enjoy and finding money and wealth and being able to continue businesses. Just again, short on time, but just wanting to like, where do you stand? Because that is one place that I see, again, in the classroom as a teacher, that's a space I'm navigating. I want you to open up a t-shirt company where the font is in graffiti because that's what you're passionate about. And that is different. And your conversation with investors could include yo.
That's the question for me. So yeah.
And how you as a leader sort of think through again if you told every kid you can't say yo, every young woman who came to you can't say yo, right? Then you could be telling young women, I am not going to help you participate in hip hop business culture.
Well, no, and you said something that's very key there. It's about the culture, right? So I always position to them, okay, so say for instance, you're going to France, right? So if you're going to France, they speak a different language and you're wanting to have the best time there. What are you going to do to prepare yourself for that time to get to know the culture? Oftentimes it says, I have to pack accordingly for the weather and I need to learn some French phrases. Yes. So when you're going into various business environments, and it goes back to that code switching, right? How are you going to be able to speak the language where they can hear what you're saying and you can receive what you want? Because the bottom line is staying focused. Why are you there and what do you want? You wanting money for your business? You wanting support for your business? So if you're going to someone who has that, you have to learn how to speak their language. And speaking their language and also positioning what your mission is. So therefore you can come out with the outcomes that you desire.
I'm using that one when I start doing some more career building. I like this tip in here in the chat too. Know thyself and read the room, says Cal. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right because I didn't see it in the earlier chat, but I think you gave us a pronunciation. I'd like to invite folks to contribute to the dialogue through questions in the chat. We're just fluid and making things work, and it's feeling like there's a lot of synergy here in the call and in the chat already for folks to be taking questions and engaging. So if you all want to ask questions in the chat, I'm going to push myself to be better because the panelists have inspired me. So I'll be going back and forth to find your questions and interact, but just want to move to a few other questions here before we take some from the audience. And just thinking a little bit about how the landscape, so we've got Lisa, 10 years. I know you mentioned with RIBBA in particular. I know in your bio, Kimberly, you talked about 20 years in this direction, 10 years in this direction, but of course you're only 19. And then Ditra, like, I know you're born and raised in Providence. Yeah, you left for a little bit, you came back. Like if you had to summarize what the landscape in Rhode Island is related to the Black community, Black women, Black girls, and funding, what's like a short summary that you would give to someone if they were asking? We can start with Ditra. If we'd like to start there, what would you say to somebody in a short summary, like what's Rhode Island like in terms of Black women and funding opportunities? What's your short answer to that? And particularly how it's changed over time. Sorry about that.
Well, I've only been here for 4 years, so I don't know how much time, and maybe other folks can speak to that time, but I will say this, that that I think, not just speaking from my own experience, but I think that investing in Black institutions, investing in Black women, investing in Black communities, there's not enough. No one, I don't care what way you slice it. Lisa has already said it. I think there is a misunderstanding, not a misunderstanding. Structural racism is real. Racism is real. Whether or not it's just foundations, there's a level of funding that comes from foundations. Is it enough? Not usually. We don't get multi-year funding. We're raising money year by year by year. What does it mean when the infrastructure in our communities is not expanding? And so I think it's, what type of institutions do you have? But as a person who grew up here, yes, and I left for 25 years and I came back and I'm like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say there aren't amazing people doing work, trying to get resources into our communities, because there are. You know, if you look at the long term and the expansion of folks in the General Assembly and what that has meant for us. Rhode Island is a colonial place. I think sometimes we forget what the hell the history of this state has been and is. And so when you look at the analysis of the overall landscape, it has implications around where does investments go? Where do people put resources? How are policies driven and designed? They're not designing for us. There's not enough of us in there. We're constantly fighting. It is a huge fight on multiple levels. And so, yeah, always more. Everyone deserves it. We should be able to define what it looks like for ourselves and make the investments real. You know, I spent 2 days on the phone with somebody trying to talk to me about $5,000. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm supposed to jump up and down and jump through a set of hoops because you want to give me $5,000. Some people might be happy about that, but I do 3 jobs every day. My time is valuable. I want you to think about the implications of what that means. And people say you should be happy for what you get. Why? I deserve more. My institution deserves more. Just like Lisa's institution deserves more. Nico's institution deserves more. We're trying to build something here.
I think that is incredibly poignant to remember that we're thinking about people, institutions, leaders, citizens. Like, there's so many levels and layers when we're thinking about this topic of investing in Black communities. I want to just go back for a minute because, Lisa, I know